Detroit Lions head coach Dan Campbell said last week that he doesn't think you need an elite quarterback to have sustained success in the NFL. But we'll check in with a couple of different teams that have been teetering right on that line to find out just how true that actually is.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, so you've got Lorin Cox, daily host of the Locked On Bears podcast, here with you, joined by our local experts on the biggest stories across the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Locked On NFL today starts with Lions head coach Dan Campbell, and not so much about the Lions, but about the state of quarterbacking in the NFL. And he said, quote, "No, I don't think you need that," in reference to elite quarterbacks. He says, quote, "I think those guys that are like that are obviously they're special, and they certainly can give you a better chance. But no, I don't believe you have to have one of those guys to have sustained success," end quote. And I think Dan Campbell brings up an interesting point here, right? You can see where when he's talking about Jared Goff, he might have an incentive to say, no, you don't need an elite quarterback. But I think there's a wider question here about sustained success. We think of the Super Bowl winners as being the elite quarterbacks, but we've seen teams without the truly best of the best QBs to sustain some success, but they also look to maybe move on and take that next step. So on the show today, we'll hear from Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers about transitioning from Jimmy Garappolo, despite having some great success with him, and taking a chance on Trey Lance, the rhyme unintentional there, for the future of their quarterback position. And we'll get into a little bit of like why no one's wanted or traded for Jimmy Garappolo up to this point. We'll also hear from Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans about running out of patience for Ryan Tannehill, much like happened in Miami, and maybe the Titans, a dark horse team to draft a quarterback, as they feel like maybe this guy's just not the one to really put them over the top, but they've had sustained success without that elite quarterback. And so the devil you know versus maybe the devil you don't. And we have to wrap up with the sad story of the weekend in the NFL. And we need to properly mourn the loss of Dwayne Haskins, who passed away far too young. And some of the media reaction from some of the big names at the big networks was grossly inappropriate and disrespectful to Dwayne Haskins and how his life ended. And so we'll sort of do a proper remembrance of a promising young quarterback with the help of David Harrison from Locked On Commanders. But let's start with this elite quarterback discussion and start with a team that has already felt like they hit the ceiling with their quarterback and is now trying to swing for the fences and hit that higher ceiling with their younger quarterback. And that's, of course, the 49ers still looking to trade Jimmy Garappolo, potentially ready to move on from Trey Lance. But that transition process hasn't fully happened yet. And we're all sort of waiting to see what's going to happen next. Our guy, Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers, will tell us. So we're here now with Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers on Twitter at BD Peacock. And Brian, I guess first of all, I want to get into this Jimmy Garoppolo situation. And I wanted to first start like, where do things stand right now? Because it was sort of the impression everyone was like, well, that they're going to trade him, but the quarterback market, everyone's kind of made their moves for the most part. There's a couple of players still hanging out there. So like, are they just waiting for draft day, or is there a chance that they could hold on to Jimmy G? And then is it an open quarterback competition? What's your understanding of where things are right now?
It's a really strange situation, Lorin. And the plan was to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. That was clearly the plan. Kyle Shanahan has come out and talked about that was the plan. And they think Trey Lance is going to be ready. And that was the plan all along. And they tried to see if they could trade Jimmy. And there were some conversations that were pretty far down the road, according to John Lynch. And Garoppolo's shoulder surgery put a little bit of a wrench into that. And there was some other, just certain circumstances with, Matt Ryan all of a sudden, they messed that up, or maybe he got it right. I don't know, but accidentally in Atlanta, right? And now Matt Ryan's on the move, and that was a quarterback you didn't think would be on the market. And then Tom Brady comes out of retirement. So there's a home for a new quarterback there that might have been somebody else, and another domino would have moved around, and maybe the 49ers would have had a trade partner for Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think they'll probably hold on to Jimmy. They believe he's more valuable than just straight up cutting right now. And there is a small injury guarantee as well, $7.5 million. So they would lose that. But then when he signed somewhere else, eventually, if it was 7.5 or more, they would get that back, but on next year's books instead of this year's books. So I don't know if that makes a big difference, but I don't think they would plan on cutting him anyway. They think that he has value. We'll see what happens in the draft. Maybe a team like the Carolina Panthers, something doesn't go right for them in the first round, and they don't take a quarterback. And maybe then they're, Thursday night, Friday morning, calling up the 49ers, and maybe something happens there. Maybe another quarterback gets injured. Maybe their own quarterback and Trey Lance gets injured. And there's no real reason to cut Jimmy Garoppolo now if you can just wait until he's healthy before training camp and cut him then, or let him compete, and iron sharpens iron. And I'll buy the argument that maybe that'll make Trey Lance better in the end, to make him go win that job against Jimmy Garoppolo instead of just handing it to him outright. And then maybe the 49ers end up, if nobody has a need at quarterback, they end up cutting him and releasing him like the Patriots did last year with Cam Newton right before the start of the season, and going with the younger quarterback.
Why does nobody seem to want him, right? I mean, obviously we know that he's not a top-notch elite quarterback, but when he's been healthy, those 2 seasons took the 49ers took the 49ers, maybe isn't the right verb, but went to the Super Bowl with the 49ers. Then last year, conference championship game with the 49ers. And his contract, while not cheap, it's not so expensive that you can't build a contending level team around him the way the 49ers have. I mean, we know he's not great, but why isn't he more of a in-demand option?
It's hard to say. I think you have to have been in the locker room with him to appreciate him the most. And everyone who's played with him has, glowing things to say about Garoppolo, the leader. And his team obviously values him a lot, and is probably wondering the same thing. Is like, why are teams signing Mitch Trubisky and not sending us a second round pick? I mean, you never know what a second round pick is going to become in a future year. You're not going to send us that for one of 32, and Jimmy Garoppolo is one of 32 starters in the NFL. And there are certain teams in the NFL right now that don't have one of 32, and they're going into the draft and might not find that one of 32 there either. So it's an interesting conundrum that the 49ers are in, that Jimmy Garoppolo's career is in, and he probably thinks he should start as well. And I don't know what he and his agent think about this whole process, and seeing those situations dwindle as well. Is he going to have to take backup money this year? Is he going to try to hang on and fight for that job in camp with the 49ers? Will the 49ers even bring him along? But I think I don't want to call it Jimmy G disrespect, but there's so much that go, and we've heard it from the Cleveland Browns and the Indianapolis Colts this offseason. They're looking for adults in the room, right? They're looking for leaders. And I thought, well, they're explaining Jimmy Garoppolo if that's really what they want. And they both went different directions, right? Not that they went in bad directions. They got good quarterbacks. But it's really important to be a leader. It's really important to have control of your offense. It's really important what you do Tuesday through Saturday in preparation, what you do pre-snap to get ready. Sometimes that's getting a team in the right run play and not even a pass play. So what a lot of fans see in Jimmy Garoppolo is maybe a mediocre arm and not enough splash plays, and his receivers making a lot of plays for him. But there's so much that goes on inside the building that everybody else sees that's around him that thinks he's a hugely valuable quarterback and a hugely valuable asset in the NFL.
Yeah, and I should say, this is not the "we love Jimmy Garoppolo and think he's the best quarterback in the NFL" segment, but I'm just curious from the 49ers perspective, like how good does Trey Lance need to be then to be, clearly better? Obviously, as a young quarterback, we haven't seen him do it on the field. The potential was certainly there. We see the skill set he has to be potentially more dynamic than Jimmy Garoppolo, but maybe not right away in year 2, but year 1 for Trey Lance. What are the odds? I mean, it would seem like you said, he is one of 32, and he's not 32, Jimmy Garoppolo, that is. So how much better can Trey Lance be? What sort of risk is there for the 49ers in going in this transition this way?
And the 49ers knew they had a starting quarterback, and they didn't have to rush Trey Lance after they spent so much to go draft him at number 3. And that was the plan last year. And they thought that Jimmy Garoppolo gave them a better opportunity to win than a rookie quarterback. And it seems as though they were probably right about that for the most part. I could argue that maybe the injured end of season Jimmy Garoppolo at that point. Maybe Trey Lance could have caught him and passed him up. They didn't want to give him that opportunity. They wanted to go with their veteran, and they went to the NFC Championship game, and they were a drop to Jaquiski Tartt interception away from being in the Super Bowl, potentially hoisting a Lombardi. So that's how close it is in the NFL. And you mentioned it earlier, both seasons that Jimmy Garoppolo's been healthy or able to play, at least he wasn't even fully healthy this year, to they've gone to the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. So he's a winning quarterback, and I think it would be really hard for any rookie to come in and just be in more command of the offense than someone like Jimmy Garoppolo or any veteran quarterback, and especially in a Shanahan offense, and the verbiage is very difficult, and it's traditionally a hard offense. And Jimmy and Kyle Shanahan's very hard on his rookies and his young players. We've seen it with Deebo Samuel, their second round guard, couldn't get on the field last year. It's something that pops up a lot with young players in Kyle Shanahan's offense.
I think both of those 49er quarterbacks are two of the more interesting quarterback situations in the NFL. Brian, really appreciate you joining us to share about it. Let everybody know one more time where they can find you on Twitter and, of course, the podcast. Both
at BD Peacock on Twitter, Locked On 49ers Daily coming at you here on the network, and I'm doing the Peacock and Williamson NFL show to soon be right here on the same Locked On NFL channel, by the way. A little breaking news here.
Wow.
This is a new development. Yeah, Peacock and Williamson, we're coming at you covering the entire league daily. We used to actually host Locked On NFL. We are going to be on YouTube now, and we're going to be on the Locked On NFL channel. So we'll be here. Check us out.
Looking forward to it. Welcome to the same channel, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again shortly.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lorin.
Really interested to see what's going to happen with the 49ers and that quarterback situation. Wherever Jimmy Garoppolo ends up, you can be sure the Locked On NFL podcast will be here to break it down for you, whether it's before the draft, during the draft, after the draft, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But the 49ers are not the only team in this sort of like quarterback questioning or ready to move on mode. The Tennessee Titans feel like they're a few steps behind, but they're getting there with Ryan Tannehill. But they've had some success, and of course, some more quarterback movement in their division could maybe open the door for them a little bit more, maybe some tougher competition. We'll see what's in store for Tennessee and whether or not they could be a dark horse quarterback team in this upcoming NFL draft next on Locked On NFL. Speaking of the draft, our friends at BetOnline are going to be your top spot for all of your NFL draft prop bets in terms of who could be the first overall pick, second overall pick, how many quarterbacks will go in the first round, over-unders on players from certain colleges. There's 1,000 different ways to bet on this draft and really take your NFL draft knowledge and earn a little extra cash with it. BetOnline is your source for all of your sports betting stats, information, needs, reviews, whether it's the NFL draft or any of your leagues. With baseball season under the way, basketball playoffs right around the corner, hockey playoffs also coming up here too, plus soccer, tennis, boxing, the Masters tournament, you name it, they have it at BetOnline. Head on over to their website or use your mobile device today to learn more about the trends and action you need to know. BetOnline, where the game starts. All the quarterback movement in the offseason so far has emphasized teams really sort of feeling like they need to take that next step at quarterback. And it's been somewhat of a pushback to what Dan Campbell said about maybe not needing an elite quarterback, but we've seen teams like the Colts look to upgrade to try and get a better quarterback than what they had. They had a middling quarterback in Wentz, but felt like they needed to do better. The Browns going with Deshaun Watson instead of Baker Mayfield, and certainly a much more complex decision than just what happened on the field with the two quarterbacks there. But another team like the 49ers with their veteran previous quarterback in limbo as they try to transition through. The Tennessee Titans haven't gotten that far yet in the Ryan Tannehill situation. That it hasn't really been the dominant storyline just yet, but we kind of get the impression after Tannehill's struggled at times at the end in the biggest games that maybe the Titans could be one of these teams that's in the market for a young quarterback, but then they start to balance building around the guy they have now and continuing the sustained success, in Dan Campbell's words, that they have had consistently above 500, making the playoffs with Tannehill, but also wanting to look to be better. It's a tricky spot that they find themselves in. And so that's why we turn to our friends from Locked On Titans to kind of help us understand where they are and where they want to be. With us now is Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans on Twitter at TickTitans. attack Titans. And Tyler, I'm curious, when you look at where the Titans stand right now, right? There's one of these teams that they're always sort of not retooling, but always trying to add that 5% better, that 1% better to try and push over the top a little bit, especially as the division keeps changing. And I guess, first of all, where's sort of your confidence level right now in where the Titans stand? I know, free agency, the main wave is done, still got the draft around the corner, but you feeling like this team is ready to take another step, or what's sort of the X factor here?
Well, I think the truth of the matter is, and I've been saying this, and it is, I guess, a negative view if you're a very optimistic fan. But I think after seeing the Titans for the last 3 seasons and the mold that they're in, Derrick Henry, run heavy offense, play action with Tannehill, the defense got better, a lot better, and they sacked Joe Burrow 9 times, tying a playoff record. AJ Brown goes for 140. The run game goes for 140 and scores. And the Titans still can't get it done. So I've been saying, this is the phrase I've been using. I think the makeup's off the pig here. I think there's no more illusion with the Titans. They could go undefeated in the regular season next year, and they would be underdogs in their first playoff game. I think that's where we're at. So I think, I don't want to be overly negative, but I want to be realistic here. I don't think that anybody believes that the Titans, it's kind of one of those things where they can make the weapons better. They can make the offensive line better. They can make the defense as good as possible, make the pass rush as good as possible. But unless they have a playmaker who can step up and lift the people around him when it matters most at quarterback, it's very unlikely that they take the next step and become a real Super Bowl contender in people's eyes. And I think after seeing Tannehill meltdown last year, they're not going to fool anybody this year.
I think sometimes, we can get caught up in those playoff moments, and obviously it's sort of a different animal there. But at the same time, like the Titans over the last 3, 4, 5 seasons, certainly the whole Vrabel area, like they're always a contender. They always play teams tough, and I know the endings of those playoff runs tend to sort of be the ones to stick with you and leave you feeling kind of the least good about the Titans. But like,
right,
you could do a lot worse than Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback, and that's one of those things. Like, if you get rid of him, there's no guarantee that the next guy's going to be better. But I don't know. Are they in a place right now where they can start that succession planning? With what Tannehill's got like a couple years left on the contract, and he's mid-30s. But is it too early, or do we start getting into the like Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers type situation where Tannehill gets unhappy if they draft somebody, or where are they in that process potentially?
Well, I think one thing that's important is Ryan Tannehill is not the level of player that Aaron Rodgers is. So he won't have the room to get mad or act out about it. And Tannehill's a professional, and he's not a diva like the quarterback in Green Bay. So he's not going to make a big stink of it if the Titans go quarterback. But I think originally coming into the draft season and during the season, I felt like you're right about Tannehill's contract. There's 2 years left on it. They can get out after next year with some dead cap, but they could reasonably get out after this season. I don't know if they want to, because like you said, it's hard to find better. And I know that my first answer was negative, but I still think the Titans win the division. I think that they have a good chance to have a home playoff game. It's just about that next step. I don't think they've taken a step back at all. They're still a very good football team that's going to be competitive every single week, should make the playoffs again for another year in a row. But it's that next step that they can't take. And as I said, going into this draft season, I thought, hey, keep Ryan Tannehill around. This is a weak, quote unquote, quarterback class, which they said Mahomes and Watson's quarterback class was weak. All about that class, but we won't bring that up. But anyways, I guess the reality is a lot of people are saying, we'll go after CJ Stroud, we'll go after Bryce Young in a better quarterback year. But I think the Titans are going to make the playoffs. I think that they're going to have a good record. I think that they're going to be picking in the late 20s, mid 20s again. And it's just so difficult, and you have to pay so much to go up to what? Pick 1, pick 2? If these quarterbacks are as hot as everybody says they are and everybody wants them and everyone's loading up for extra double draft picks in the first round so they can go get one of those guys, well, how are the Titans without an extra first round pick in the mid 20s going to have enough to go up to 1 or 2 to get one of those guys? It's not going to happen. So what you need to do is, and you look around the league, there's 3 or 4 starters who weren't first round picks. Russell Wilson, Dak, Tom Brady, like Jimmy Garappolo. Like, give me a break. You need to get your quarterback in the first round, and you get that 5th year of team control with the 5th year option if you take somebody in the first round. So I think that this year, I like guys like Matt Corral from Ole Miss, Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. Not as high on Sam Howell, but I see why some people think he could blossom into something. So I think if the Titans feel comfortable with one of those guys, especially with the way the draft board could go and their positions of need being drained before it gets to their selection, they don't have a second round pick. So not a lot of maneuverability. I think you have to consider a quarterback, a young guy, whichever one you like. If they're there, you might as well go ahead and take them. You have a year if you need more time. Tannehill does have an extra year on his contract. You could ride Tannehill for 2 seasons and groom a rookie underneath and get him ready to go. But I think it certainly is not out of the question for the Titans to begin to ask those questions and maybe put a plan in place to try to get somebody who can raise all boats and be the tide that does that and have them in place for the future.
Yeah, it's that double-edged sword because, like you said, you're not picking then one of the quarterbacks at the top. You're picking one of those later quarterbacks, and as the later you go, the lesser chance of being better than Ryan Tannehill. Really fascinating team and a situation to watch moving forward. Tyler, really appreciate you joining us. Let us know one more time where they can find you on Twitter, and of course, what you're doing with the podcast network.
Yeah, at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter for all of my crazy takes and all my fun information that I like to give out there to the Titans faithful. Obviously doing the Locked On Titans podcast Monday through Friday, breaking down all the news and notes out of Nashville, having a focus on film and analytics kind of intertwined in that. So check that out for some good podcast content and make your Locked On Titans your first listen every day.
Excellent. Well, Tyler, really appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure we'll hear more about the Titans plan here throughout the offseason. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Don't be surprised then if the Tennessee Titans could be one of those sneaky teams in your mock drafts to take a quarterback at the end of the first round, or maybe move up to get the quarterback that they want in this draft class. Because like Tyler said, it's not like they're anticipating having a better draft pick next year. And at some point they have to get that transition plan going if they want to go from a decent quarterback and some sustained success to taking that next step and trying to put them over the top the way we saw the Rams successfully do. Certainly the Buccaneers in getting Tom Brady. Different scales, same general idea. The 49ers trying to do now with Trey Lance, or the Chicago Bears, my Locked On Bears, doing with Justin Fields instead of Mitch Trubisky, right? That's what the name of the game is, moving quarterbacks all around. And sometimes you have to take as many swings as you can, try and get your guy and try and find where you can find absolute value at that position. There's a lot of teams in that quarterback transition. I mentioned Mitch Trubisky going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and now the Steelers, of course, dealing with a very difficult situation, the loss of one of their players, a player that really was really nice to see players around the league come out in support of Dwayne Haskins following his tragic death late last week. And some of the response from prominent media members in particular was not handled well. And it was such a stark contrast to all the nice things we heard about Dwayne Haskins. And so I thought it was really our duty here on the Locked On NFL podcast to properly sort of eulogize and memorialize Dwayne Haskins. And so we'll sort of remember the young quarterback for how great he was at Ohio State and how much his teammates loved him and how he seemed to keep growing as a person off the field as well. Next on Locked On NFL. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars ever. Because Built Bars truly are one of a kind. I've tried a lot of different protein bar products in my day. I like to get some extra protein when I go to the gym and try and build some muscle. But a lot of protein bars out there, they'll taste really kind of cardboardy or chalky, and they're just not a good. Even if they have a bunch of protein in it, you just don't enjoy it. It's almost like taking medicine. Or you have some that are just loaded up with a bunch of sugar, and you end up feel like you're just getting a bunch of extra crap in you that it's not that good for you. But Built Bars are truly the best of both worlds because they taste like candy bars, but they actually are good for you. So every Built Bar is low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. All the macronutrients you're looking for in a protein bar, but they're also soft, easy to chew, and covered in 100% real chocolate. They come in a bunch of delicious flavors from caramel brownie to raspberry to lemon. I think they've had cheesecake built puffs before. So many different great flavors. I've not had a bad flavor yet, and I promise you will find one you love. Head on over to Built.com. Enter in our promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. really, I think the biggest tragedy of the offseason thus far, a life lost way too soon. Dwayne Haskins, the now Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback. He was previously a first-round pick of the Washington football team / Commanders out of Ohio State. Tragically hit by, I believe, a dump truck on a highway in Florida while he was down there to visit and work out with his teammates at a time when you're not required to be working out with your teammates. You're not required to be throwing with them, but he was going out of his way to really endear himself in Pittsburgh and be the best quarterback he could be while down there. And not only his career, but his life cut so tragically short. It's been difficult for the people in his life. It's been nice, though, to see the outpouring of support across the NFL. But then, prominent insiders and prominent, veteran NFL media member both kind of said some bad things about Dwayne Haskins, even like in reporting and talking about his death. And it just felt wholly inappropriate and just disrespectful and really a shame upon the industry that we're all a part of. And so I really wanted to take some time on today's podcast to properly remember Dwayne Haskins for the great player that he was and how he's grown as a man, and really make him a human again and not just a robot that plays football for enjoyment and either does well or doesn't do well. And we kind of forget sometimes that, yes, even though they are millionaires who are very skilled at certain things, they are people with real families, real emotions, real, they exist beyond the time we're watching them on Sundays. And so that's why I was glad to be able to bring on and talk to a man who covered Dwayne Haskins early in his career and has seen sort of that growth and maturation of him all the way up through his time now in Pittsburgh. We're joined now by David Harrison, one of the hosts of Locked On Commanders here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, on Twitter at DHarrison82. And David, I wish we were on to have a better, more fun, enlightening conversation, but I think we have to talk about and properly sort of memorialize Dwayne Haskins. I mean, I think the tragedy of the offseason so far, a quarterback 24 years old, hit by, I think, did I read a dump truck or some kind of large vehicle on a highway? And I know some of the details on that have been a little bit sort of murky there, but I guess, what are sort of your memories of him in Washington, about him coming out of that draft class? And obviously his career there didn't go the way you would have hoped, but certainly well regarded as just like a genuinely good human being that his teammates and coaches seem to love, even if the on-field stuff, wasn't always everything they wanted it to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing, that we're going to remember about Dwayne Haskins is a young man who was, by every measure of the word, a young man and had a lot of potential ahead of him, and a lot of growing to do, and was looking forward to getting a lot out of that growth and proving to people, more himself and kind of those that are in his inner circle, but also to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and showing them that they had made the right investment when they gave him the chance that they did after he left Washington. And I think, it's easy sometimes when we look at these athletes, we look at just celebrities in general, to kind of put them, it's almost like putting them on a pedestal, which seems kind of weird because it leads to a lot of criticism. So it's weird to hear it, being considered being put on a pedestal, but we almost expect them to behave unhumanly, right? And if you put a lot of young 20-year-olds, I was talking to my co-host Chris Russell about this, during our show. If you would have given me at 20, 21 years old, millions and millions of dollars and the freedom to do whatever I wanted to do with it, I can't tell you what I probably, the trouble I probably would have gotten myself into. And we equate, youthful indiscretions a lot of times as bad character flaws, instead of just a lack of maturity. And I think at the end of the day, that's what really a lot of those things that have been talked about, unfortunately, have been to. But, it's important to remember that he was a young man. He had a wife, he had a family, and they loved him, and he loved them. And he wasn't an evil person. Anybody who's talking ill is basically making more out of something because of the platform that he stood on. And I think it's unfortunate that we do that sometimes to each other. But an unfortunate accident that happened, and obviously there's still more information being gathered that'll come out. But it's not the way you want to enter the weekend, not the way you want to start off a week. Obviously, our episode was a very somber one, and for good reason. But I hope that moving forward, he gets remembered for being someone who, at 11 years old, walked into the Ohio State locker room and announced that he was going to go to college there. And then not only did he go to college there, but he helped them win a lot of games, and some important games, coming in as a backup, trailing Michigan in their most important rivalry, and bringing them back to a victory after JT Barrett left with a knee injury, and then becoming the first Ohio State quarterback selected in the first round of the NFL draft in a very long time. And then you look after him, Justin Fields is the next one to come out in the first round. And now you have CJ Stroud, who is expected to be the next Ohio State quarterback to follow that path. And Ohio State's not a quarterback school. So to have, 3 in a row who are expected to be first round draft picks, and it's all started with Dwayne Haskins. So just, there's a lot of good that this man did in 24 years of life that unfortunately I think some are using some of his immaturities that everybody has at the age of 20, 21, 24 even to try to overshadow that.
Yeah, and it's been interesting too, like the pushback to that, not only to
Yeah.
prominent NFL media members, but even just like NFL players. Like I saw I think it was one of his Steelers receivers said like Dwayne Haskins is the kind of hard worker that I want to be when I grew up. Was one of them
Right.
said like that they aspired, like they saw the way that maybe even if Haskins took him a little bit of time to really sort of settle into that sort of NFL, the way you carry yourself as a professional, like the way he did get to that point, and by all accounts in Pittsburgh, like really putting in the work. And like I know there was reports of him bringing his body fat percentage down quite a bit and
Right.
doing like all the different things. Like he really settled into that, and I think it's those teammates that are around him that aren't just saying that because it's not like Dwayne was the starter in Pittsburgh and they had to like, you got to back your guy if he's back. Like he was just there on a like just to compete. Like he was not
Right.
guaranteed anything as far as like an opportunity. And like so it was just like they could have cut him, and those players wouldn't necessarily had direct ties to him and to like feel like they owed him a certain allegiance. But he seemed to really earn that. And I didn't realize until getting ready for this that I should have realized that the number 7 he wore in Washington, like they let him wear Joe Theismann's number. Like
Yeah.
they weren't letting players wear that. I mean, it seems like there was a certain amount of respect for him, even in Washington. I mean, how much they had invested in him, and now in Pittsburgh, it's been that's why it's so especially striking. I think when you get some of the criticisms of him immediately following his death. Like not only is that a bad look in general, but also when you get the contrast to that from everything we've heard about him has really been to the contrary of what the big names have said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, there's two dynamics to this whole thing. There's the personal side of things and there's the business side of things. And nobody is denying the business side of things and how that went. But you have the personal side. And that's one of the reasons he was allowed to wear number 7 is one of the reasons he was the draft pick in the first place was because people were attracted and wanted his personality and his infectious nature to be on that roster. And, beyond that, you have a business side that you have to deal with. And that's where some of this stuff comes from. But that's what it's just the human side of things. It really is just at the end of the day, and everybody wants to be treated with respect, or be treated with some sort of empathy or sympathy or kindness, whatever you want to call it. And it takes me back to we've spoken to Chase Young, the Washington Commanders pass rusher, a couple times this offseason. And the last time I talked to him, we were talking about the uniforms, the name change, and we were talking about the NFL draft because I believe I was on my way to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and I said to him, I said, I'm going to be talking to a lot of young prospects. You were there, Lorin. A lot of us were there. We're talking to a lot of young prospects. What's something as a media member? We talk all the time, like, what are these kids going through? But as a media member, what's something you want me to know, or you would want, my peers to know when we talk to these young men? And he just said, and literally the first words out of his mouth, just remember they're human. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes that gets lost in every profession. And a lot of times when we hide behind this shield of I'm just doing my job. Well, I think it's important to remember that as people, we all have a choice to make, and when we choose to do something that's unsavory or that's whether it's intentional or mistaken, we have the choice to either accept responsibility for it and learn from it, or to hide behind the veil of I'm just doing my job. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of why we do things. I don't know, Lorin, why you got into this business. I know why I got into this business, and it wasn't to tear people down. And in a moment that's very personal to a lot of people, unfortunately, there are some people in this profession who chose to quote unquote do their jobs and ignore or forget the fact that there are people involved in what's happening, and that's unfortunate. But again, we all have our decisions to make and choose how we conduct ourselves. And nobody's gonna agree with everything we say. There's somebody out there right now listening to me probably saying that I'm making too much of it, and that's fine. That's why we're human beings, and that's why nobody is as understood by everybody. But that's from where I sit, that's just the unfortunate part of it.
Well, and that's why I wanted to make sure we do our jobs to really sort of put the humanity back in. There's multiple ways to do the job, and I thought, given some of the initial responses here, I felt like it was our job to remember the humanity, and of course, remember the life of Dwayne Haskins. David, again, appreciate you joining us. Let everybody know one more time where they can find you here on the Locked On Podcast Network and, of course, on social media and where all your work is.
Yeah, absolutely. Locked On Commanders 5 days a week, either me or my co-host Chris Russell. Locked On Bucks 5 days a week, again, either me or my co-host James Jarko. And then on Twitter at DHarrison82.
Excellent. Well, David, hopefully next time we have you on the podcast, we can talk about something a little bit better than this, but important conversation. I really appreciate you joining us for it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Lorin.
A tough conversation to have there with David Harrison, but one that's important. And I just really want to, again, send all our condolences to the Haskins family and his teammates and everyone trying to sort of deal with and mourn this loss, because loss in any form is difficult for all of us. And again, especially just with the way it was handled when it was first reported. I want to put as much sort of good memorializing of Haskins to outweigh the mishandling of how that situation was first put forward, and show you sort of the way that we try and humanize and have good character and good values. And like David was saying, right, it's not just doing a job in reporting, but actually like having some emotion and feeling behind what we do and the people we cover and the people we talk to. And it's just like, it's integrity and important values that I think we really hold dearly here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So I appreciate you tuning in and being a part of it today. Thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen today. I hope you'll come back tomorrow and making it your first listen one more time, or for the rest of the week, every single day. The Locked On NFL podcast is here for you 5 days a week. If you're looking for your second listen, our Peacock and Williamson show also breaks down the NFL from the league-wide perspective, or you can go through any of our individual Locked On Podcast Network shows, like Locked On Bears, for example. I heard the handsome host they have over there does a great job breaking down everything in and out of Chicago. But of course, we have your team every day across the Locked On Podcast Network. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be back with you tomorrow with all the latest and greatest out of the NFL. In the meantime, peace.